Hey there, it's Olivia Savannah here from Olivia's Catastrophe, and today I'm here to film one of my favourite videos to film all year round, and this is my 20 books by black authors with black characters that I am recommending to you. As of when this video goes live, it is February, which is Black History Month in the US, and I don't think I need to tell you about what's happening in the US. I don't think I need to tell you about how important it is to champion black authors and black writers at this particular time. It's also the same in the UK. It's really important. Around the world, it's really important. So please, please, please be reading your black authors, supporting black organizations, and just fighting for people's rights generally. There are a lot of types of people in need: the queer community, the disabled community, women, and it is scary to be alive right now. And my smallest thing that I can do is recommend you some jolly good books by some black authors that you can read to not only enlighten you more, but to just bring you enjoyment and bring you empathy and understanding. So let's get down to these 20 books. I've got a lot here. I've tried to choose a range of genres, but they are also books that I've read and recommend and really think are very good ones. So it's within the realm of books that I read. I've also been doing this once a year for the past 5 years, so I'll have links down below to all the previous videos. If you didn't get enough recommendations in this one, there are plenty more where that came from. The first book I'm going to recommend is Bitter by Akwaeke Emezi. This is connected to Pet, but it can also be read as a standalone. This is an upper YA fiction novel by a trans author, so you're supporting a black and a trans author. And in Bitter, we're following our main character who has the ability to draw pictures and take the creatures out of the pictures that she draws. There's also a lot of protest happening around here. There's a lot of millionaires who are the villains against the people in this community. They are active and they are pushing back against the oppression that they are facing. But Bitter, our main character, is feeling a bit scared of the protest. She doesn't want to go to them, and she doesn't know how she can contribute to the fighting back that they are doing without having to put herself on the front line. And so this book ends up being a big book that's a big metaphor for a lot of things about, you know, millionaires and billionaires and how they can be villainous as well, and how the system is supporting them and not supporting others, but also about pushing back and protest, and the ways in which you can still protest and push back even if you have to do it in a slightly different way to feel safe and secure. And so I found this book to just have such really big and good and bursting with lots of themes, and yet the writing itself is as beautiful as Akwaeke Emezi always makes it. It's as accessible for teenagers as Akwaeke Emezi can make it in their YA, and I just think it's a very, very good book for people to be reading. The next book I'm going to recommend you is an adult literary fiction. This is called Rootless by Krystle, Zara, Appiah, and this is a book about a couple. And this couple, it's about how they get together, but it's also about the fact that the woman wants to have no children and he wants to have children. And yet they come to an agreement and they live their lives, and part of this is set in Western world and part of this is set in Ghana because they live across those two countries. And a lot of this is just about the pressure that she faces as a black woman who has chosen to have no children. The pressure you get from within the religious community, from the aunties, from the well-meaning family members, from the friends. And I just found this to be such a relatable book because there are so much pressure that women are under to have children, even if they've already chosen and made very clear and to state that that is something that they don't want. And it's about the consequences of whether you give on this or not, and how it impacts and changes your relationships. And I do think there's been a lot of conversation around what this means for women, which I think is very important, but I particularly appreciated that this showed what that conversation is like for black women, and especially for African community black women, because the African community layer adds something slightly different and pressurizing on top of it as well. So I really appreciated this book for delving into all of that, and I think the writing was very good. The ending is a bit abrupt, but don't let that put you off because it's still quite an impactful ending. Next, I'm going to recommend you a non-fiction book, and that is Disobedient Bodies by Emma Dabiri. It's no secret that I love Emma Dabiri. I'm pretty sure in previous videos you'll see that I recommend different books of hers, but Disobedient Bodies is a very, very timely and good one for us to be reading as Black people, but also for everyone to be reading generally. A lot of this is about beauty and the concept of Black beauty and what that means, but also just about our bodies in general, how we treat them, how we admire them, and how we reject them from time to time. I found this to be particularly insightful at this current point in time because for the past few years we've had a body type trending as the desirable image of what a body should look like that is suitable to Black, the typical stereotypical, you know, Black body of being curvaceous, of big lips. That's what people have wanted. However, now we're seeing a shift away from this ideal body type. It's become something new, it's become something different, and that loss is going to impact a lot of people who had the previous, you know, desirable body type. And I think that's where it becomes a very good time to read Disobedient Bodies by Emma Dabiri, but also I think just generally, so that you can have a general understanding of what it means that body types do go in and out of fashion, and how to look after and love your body in the state that it is, whatever state that is. So yeah, very important book for everyone all around as well. It wouldn't be me if I didn't recommend some poetry in these videos, so I'm going to recommend Signs Music by Raymond Antrobus. He is one of my all-time favourite poets. He is a Jamaican British, deaf poet, and so his poetry is often imbued with those themes, and this collection is all about him becoming a father for the first time. So the first part of the collection is poems from before the child is born, so when he's anticipating becoming a father, and then after becoming a father, and it's particularly looking at fatherhood from the perspective of somebody who is Jamaican, British, mixed race and deaf. And so I loved how these poems were just so full of love for somebody who hadn't even been born yet, and then that love was carried through to when this child was born, but also just the experience of what it's like to be a disabled parent, and also what it's like to see your child sign for the first time and communicate with you in your language for the very first time. It's a beautiful, beautiful poetry collection, and Raymond Antrobus always has such accessible poetry. It's very clear and direct in writing style, and yet it still feels lyrical and poetical too, so I always recommend his poetry for beginner poet readers, but also for those who are more advanced down the line as well. It suits all reading poetry levels. I've got two graphic novels here that I want to recommend you back to back. The first one is called Ghost Roast, and this is by Shawnelle Gibbs, Shawnee Gibbs, and Emily Cannon. So you've got two sisters who have worked on this. This is a really fun, playful YA graphic novel about somebody who's able to see ghosts and nobody else can, but her dad runs a ghost busting business. She gets in trouble and she's to help out with the ghost busting business for the summer, but that means she ends up being around ghosts for the summer. When she goes to a particular house which is haunted from back in the slave trade times, there's a story that needs to be unraveled so these ghosts can be laid to rest. I really enjoy this graphic novel. It's so much fun to read it. It has got beautiful artwork and it's bursting with lovely colours, and so it's just a beauty to the eye when you're reading this graphic novel. But of course it's also delving a little bit into some of the racism of old times, which is woven into the supernatural, fun, ghosty story that you get to experience. I think this is a lot of fun for teenagers, but also for adults to read if you enjoy a fun graphic novel. But if you want a bit more of a serious graphic novel, I'm going to recommend you the Kindred graphic novel, which was a novel originally written by Octavia E. Butler, but the graphic novel is adapted by Damian, Duffy and John Jennings. Now, I love the original novel, and so I will always recommend the Octavia E. Butler original, but for those of you who don't read too much, who struggle a bit with reading, who just are never going to get around to reading Kindred in the original form, I highly, highly recommend you read this graphic novel instead. It's not my favourite artwork, but the artwork does the job. It emotes the emotions that you were going to feel while reading this book, and it tells the story and distills it into a shorter form very succinctly and very well, so you get the impact of all of the themes and the messages and the overall story without losing any of the emotion and importance and relevance of what is being said. I've noticed I haven't even told you what Kindred is about. Kindred is about a black woman who's living in contemporary times. She's married to a white man. Everything's fine. This is post, you know, I wanted to say post-racism, but that doesn't really exist, does it? It's post the 1964 bill, Civil Rights Act being passed. But she ends up time traveling back to the past where the slave trade is still in progress, and it's about her being pulled back and forth in time and her experiences in the past and then her experiences in the present, and not knowing when she's going to be transported to either time period, which is of course incredibly stressful but also incredibly dangerous whenever she's in the past. It's a brilliant book, one of the best books I have ever read, and so reading it in graphic novel form and rereading and experiencing that story was something special. This one is for my black boys. So I've got 24 Seconds From Now by Jason Reynolds. I have read this. It's a young adult novel, and it is about two teenagers who decide they are going to have sex for the first time, and then you go from that moment to 24 seconds before, to 24 minutes before, to 24 hours before, to you get the point. So you're going backwards in time throughout this book, and you get to see their love story and how they fall for each other as teenagers, but also about a black boy trying to be worthy of this black girl that he really likes, but also asking questions about first experiences that people have had, or what love really means to all of the family members and extended family members and friends, and getting these very different answers of what love can look like, both physically and emotionally. And in the acknowledgements of this young adult book, Jason Reynolds says, "This is a book that I wrote because black boys deserve love stories too." And that really struck me, because they do. We see so many romance novels, which is fantastic, and women deserve them. But don't forget that, you know, it takes two to tango for romance, and if you are in a heteronormative relationship, that includes boys. And in some queer relationships that also includes boys, obviously. But yes, we do need to have more romance stories that are geared towards the male reading audience, and I love that this is one that was written for black boys by a black man. Speaking of romance, I'm here to recommend Highly Suspicious and Unfairly Cute by Talia Hibbert. Talia Hibbert is a fantastic black female romance writer. This book was fantastic. I buddy read it with my best friend. It has got main characters who have OCD rep and its own voices for that, plus size fat girl rep, also own voices for that, and it's about these two friends who have become enemies, who may become friends again and possibly lovers, and they are both giving for the same grant for university that will impact them in different ways. So they're kind of competing against each other as well. It is very sweet, it is very wholesome, it is very much a British secondary school romance as well, which made me very happy as somebody who is British and black to see that kind of representation in there. And it's just so sweet, the banter is so good, but it also tackles a lot of things to do with familial relationships, whether that's good relationships with your family or bad ones, or whether or not you want to do something different than what your parents have set out for you. And academic pressure, it delves into that as well. All around really good. I don't think there'll come a day when I don't recommend Talia Hibbert, so this is a very sound recommendation. I want to delve into the horror genre a little bit, and I'm going to recommend The Scammer by Tiffany D. Jackson. This is the book on this recommendation list that I've read the most recently, and it's a young adult horror. You're following this one teenager, like early upper years teenager, who's going to university for the first time, and she makes a group of friends, and one of these friends, they're all flatmates, has their ex-convict brother come and move in with them, and as soon as he moves in, things start to get a little bit strange. This is very much a book about cult-like behavior, manipulation, gaslighting, and a psychological horror. So do be prepared for that when you are going in. And this book was absolutely petrifying to read, because there is nothing scarier than that. There is nothing scarier than your own mind being used against you. And I was hooked. I whizzed through this book because I was absolutely petrified for our characters, and I wanted everything to be alright by the end. I also found out that it's based on a true story, so I will link that true story down below. Thank you to Kristen at Kristen Craves Books for letting me know that. It's petrifying reading the real story as well, but I highly recommend you read the book first and then the article. Going to non-fiction memoir, I'm going to recommend you Simply More by Cynthia Erivo. Now, unless you were living under a rock for the past 2 years, you will have heard about Wicked and the hype around that and seen Cynthia Erivo playing Elphaba. But Cynthia Erivo is much more than that role in particular. She has been an actor on Broadway, she is an avid and keen runner, and she has had things to say about some of the experiences that she's had in life as a black woman, but also as a queer black woman. And in her memoir, it's quite short, it's quite succinct, but you get a good understanding of what brought her from day dot to her playing this role. And I love that she kind of compares her journey to Elphaba's character journey as well. There are spoilers for Wicked in this, so if you haven't seen Wicked and you still want to, I recommend watching the film or the musical before you read this book. You don't have to read the actual book because it doesn't spoil that. But I just sat down and from beginning to end I read that whole thing in one sitting because Cynthia's voice is so captivating and feels so real, and just like Becoming by Michelle Obama, it's like having a conversation with Cynthia. I have heard that the audiobook is also narrated by Cynthia herself, so if you are an audiobook listener, that might be the way you want to go. The picture book I have on this list is actually a Christmassy one, and it's A Piece of Black Cake for Santa by Yolanda T. Marshall. Now this is a picture book about loads of children from different areas of the Caribbean and also different areas of black culture getting ready for Santa coming the next day, and so they all leave out something that's slightly different depending on which island they're from. Some of them are leaving out sorrel, some of them are leaving out black cake, and I just loved that you got to see a book that was about Christmas celebrated differently from the traditional Western culture celebrating Christmas, and what foods are eaten in different places. It made me hungry. The illustrations are good, not my favorite, but they are good, and I just think this is a lovely one to read with children in the run up to Christmas. My nephew in particular absolutely loves it, and then urged his mum to leave some of the things out that he read about in the book. So that is a very nice picture book that I wanted to recommend. If you've got somebody who's not a big reader, I recommend in the young adult space Empress and Aniya by Carty-Williams. This is a book about two teenagers. They are both black, and one of them is wealthy and one of them is not so wealthy, and they end up having a body switch, and so they get to experience things from the different sides of the coin. And I just think it's very important to remember that even though, you know, black people are all black people, we are not a monolith. We come in different classes, shapes and sizes with different experiences as well. And I liked that this book emphasized that and showed about the differences in class, but also how they are both still impacted by like racist experiences nonetheless. So this is a very good like short one for the teenagers who aren't big readers. It would be remiss of me not to recommend the best book of all the books that I read in 2025, and that is Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin. If you're a classics reader and you want to read a black queer classic, then Giovanni's Room is the one for you. It's about a white man, so it's actually got a white main character, but don't worry, it's got black characters in it, such as Giovanni. But you've got a white main character who goes to Paris from the US, and he is just gallivanting through the city enjoying his experience. It's not named, but he's probably either gay or bisexual. He has a girl that he is with, but he meets Giovanni, and it's about the time that he spends with Giovanni and in Giovanni's room and what happens. Now this book, I do have to give a content warning, is full of a lot of internalized and external homophobia, because our main character understands that he is queer to some degree and is denying himself that truth while spending all of his time in a romantic relationship with a man. So you can see how that is going to be incredibly toxic. But what James Baldwin, as a black queer man himself, manages to do with this novel is show how toxic and terrible and dangerous and harmful homophobia truly is, by showing us an incredibly unlikable main character doing the things that he does. You can't help but wish everything could be different, you know, that everything could be accepted. And that's how impactful and powerful this book is. Exquisitely well done. That takes a lot of talent. If you are a short story reader, you need to be reading the short story collection For Such a Time as This by Shani Akilah. You just have to do it. This is a short story collection about a group of black friends. You follow each and every character as they tell their story, and they're all just having very different experiences. They're all from slightly different places, whether that's in Africa, whether that's in the Caribbean, whether that's just, you know, being third or second generation in Western world, and lots of them are experiencing different things. There's a short story on first love, there's a short story about the experience of endometriosis as a black woman, there's experience of, you know, black exhaustion in the workplace, grief. They touch on all sorts of different things. I think Shani's writing style is really, really good. I was absolutely entranced in every single short story, but she really took me to wherever she took me, and she took me to those thoughts and those feelings, and I loved seeing such a diverse range of stories within one collection. Very well done. For my fantasy readers, I'm going to be recommending Ring Shout by P. Djeli Clark. This is, you can see I'm going through my best books of the year right now. It's a fantasy horror novella set in a world where some of the KKK are literal demon monsters. But not everybody can see them. Most people just see them as KKK, but there's a motley group of black fighters who have magic within their equipment, and they can fight back against these monstrous KKK characters. But something big is brewing, something big is going down, and that is where our story starts. And in this novella, P. Djeli Clark manages to pull off amazing world building, a brilliant story that I found unpredictable, a really good message around racism and the dangers of racism, but also really make me care about this group of characters who are fighting back with everything they have to protect the people in the community that they are part of. If you loved Sinners, you will love this book. For my middle grade readers, I've got Dead Yard by PJ Killburn. This is a book about a young boy who eats a patty from his great-great-uncle's dead yard, and by doing so his great-great-uncle's ghost becomes attached to him. At the same time, children are mysteriously becoming ill all across his neighborhood, and so him and his great-great-uncle's ghost are off to save the day and find out what is happening. This is a book that includes Caribbean mythology and folklore in it in terms of what is happening, and I also just really loved the representation of a Jamaican British big family. It really reminded me of my own family with all of my cousins and all of my aunties and uncles, and so I just loved the dynamic group of the chaos of all of these family members being involved in this story. There's illustrations, which is really fun. They are in black and white, and it's perfect for early middle grade readers. I gotta recommend at least one novel in verse per video of this I do, and for that I'm going to be recommending Skin by Ybi Zoboi. While this is young adult, it is a fantasy novel in verse, and in Skin we are following what they call in this book succulents, but if you're Jamaican you'll know them as old hags, and these are creatures that can shed their skin at night, and they appear as a ball of flame, and then they can sip from people's life forces and then go back into their skin very neatly in the morning. So that is what this is about, but you're following two teenage girls, one of them who knows they are a succulent, and they are moving to the US for the first time from Jamaica, and they're not loving that experience. They're very dark skinned, they're not fitting in, and they are also quite poor. And then you've got another girl from a different family who is quite wealthy, who's very popular, but her skin is really a problem for her. It's very itchy and she feels uncomfortable in it, almost like she wants to rip it off completely. And it's about what happens when those two girls' storylines collide in more ways than one. I thought this was a very good novel in verse. I really like everything that I've read by Ybi Zoboi before, and this is no different. The poetry in the novel in verse was done incredibly well, but also it's just fun to read a novel in verse that includes Caribbean mythology so thoroughly. I've never read anything like it before, and it was a good story. Really well done, and I like how it tackled a lot of discussion around black beauty, especially when it comes to light skin versus dark skin, seen as more desirable. Going back to young adult, I've got a contemporary emotional story here, and that is When We Collided by Danielle Joando. This is a British version of The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas, pretty much, where you are experiencing police brutality and racism in the UK. So it's set in Manchester, and there is a boy who is stabbed in the streets, and he's stabbed in front of loads of people, but only 3 black teenagers stop and try to do anything about it, and from that moment on their worlds have collided. And it's about these 3 teenagers, why they stopped, what they saw, and what they experienced after that. These 3 teenagers are very different. One of them is queer and in the foster care system. One of them is very wealthy and is the only black person in his school. And the other one is in a school that's written off as people don't excel there, and she's doing incredibly well, and the educational people in the system are very suspicious of the fact that she seems to be doing better than all of her peers. So those are the stories that you're following, and I just got so emotional reading this book because it was very relatable in some respects, but it just made me so livid and so angry about all of the things that these black teenagers had to face that they didn't deserve to face, that wasn't their fault, but was being pushed upon them by the educational system, by the police, by the people around them. And it just broke my heart again and again and again, because while I was reading this book I was thinking, this isn't unrealistic, this is actually very, very realistic. And that is very, very disappointing. I've got a poetry collection here, another one, and that is Mannerism by Ybi Zoboi. This was in my top 3 books that I read in the past year, and this is a poetry collection by a black man, and a lot of this is poetry that's based on real experiences, real things that have happened, whether that be police brutality or just experiences within black culture. And then the second half of the poetry collection is about black grief, about black men grieving communally and individually. And as I was reading this collection again, I was just feeling like, oh, this is so true, this is so real, this is so relatable, this is exactly the way that we grieve, this is exactly the way that we push back, this is exactly the way that we try to find joy in such sad times and spaces, and why our laughter, you know, as Dave says in one of his raps, loud in our laughter, silent in our suffering. I think this poetry collection encompasses that. I do think this one is more poetic than Raymond Antrobus, so you've got a lot more use of literary devices and you've got a lot more use of stylistic choices to bring the poetry to light. So maybe it's one to read after you've read 1 or 2 poetry collections before, but I just urge people to read this collection. It is beautiful, it is harrowing, it is heartbreaking, it is important. And then we're down to the last book that I'm going to recommend you, and I've saved a YA to the end because I've actually recommended quite a lot of YA here. I've just noticed that I've gone through, and that is Confessions of an Alleged Good Girl by Joya Goffney. I have recommended Joya Goffney in these videos before, but that's because she's just so good at writing what she writes. And in Confessions of an Alleged Good Girl, you get to see a teenager discovering that she has vaginismus, discovering that maybe the purity culture that she's been raised in is quite toxic, and also trying to look at faith while dismantling some of the toxic church culture elements. I really love this. I didn't know about vaginismus before. I learned about a new condition. I also really liked how it managed to tackle the themes of faith and show that faith can be good, but sometimes it's the people, it's the church culture, it's the concepts that they're pushing on women that can be very toxic. And it showed like queer Christians, it showed men who are Christians, and I just liked that it had a diverse range within the Christianity experience. As somebody who is a believer herself, this was really important for me to see and to see unpacked in a book. But this is not the only thing it tackles. It managed to show a really lovely love story where one of the characters is discovering their own self-importance and self-worth in the process of learning what love should and can look like, and also very distinctly what it does not look like. It's a book that packed a lot in within 300 pages, but managed to pull every single element of its storyline off with finesse. And there you have it. Those are the 20 books that I've read and I personally recommend to you. And as I said, if it's not enough, I've got 5 years worth of videos of book recommendations down below, which span into different genres if you're looking for like more adult, more non-fiction. I've had years where I've read more non-fiction than fiction, and years where I've read more adult or more poetry than this. So there are so many books out there. There is no reason why you should only be reading white authors in this day and age. That's all I have to say on that. Please let me know in the comment section down below what's a book by a black author that you really loved. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Hit the subscribe button if you want to see more, and don't forget to hit the notification bell to be updated every time I have a new video. And you know what they say, onwards and upwards. Excelsior!